The story opens on Station Kepler 70, a remote human research outpost on the edge of a vast salvage field orbiting a dead star system. The facility has been in operation for nearly 2 decades, serving as humanity's primary archaeological and anthropological research hub for studying the remnants of failed civilizations scattered throughout the sector. The station itself is a sprawling modular structure constructed from reinforced titanium and advanced composites, a testament to human engineering, but also a monument to isolation. Laboratories line the central spine of the station, their windows revealing workstations cluttered with spectrographic analyzers, holographic databases, and the accumulated detritus of academic pursuit. Habitation pods radiate outward, like the spokes of a wheel, each housing between 2 and 4 researchers. At the station's heart lies a greenhouse, a verdant bubble of life where the crew grows supplemental food: tomatoes, lettuce, soybeans, all adapted to the minimal gravity and artificial light of orbital cultivation. The protagonist is Dr. Marcus Chen, a 53-year-old xenanthropologist whose career has been defined by meticulous observation and philosophical inquiry. His face is lined, bearing the marks of decades spent in lit laboratories and the psychological weight of perpetual exile. His hands are steady, marked by small scars from fieldwork and laboratory accidents. Marcus carries himself with the deliberate posture of someone accustomed to solitude, moving through the station's corridors with purposeful efficiency. He is a widower. His wife, Elena, died in childbirth on Earth 30 years ago, along with the daughter she was carrying. The loss carved a void in Marcus that he never filled, instead channeling his grief into an obsessive pursuit of understanding the cosmos and humanity's ephemeral place within it. He never remarried, never adopted, never formed lasting relationships beyond professional courtesies. Instead, he dedicated himself to studying the dead, cataloging the remnants of extinct civilizations, reconstructing their technologies, extrapolating their philosophies from fragmentary artifacts. Marcus volunteered for the Kepler 7 station assignment 8 years ago, and the decision was universally understood by his colleagues as a form of self-imposed exile. The station offered what Earth's universities could not: unlimited access to the salvage field, minimal administrative oversight, and most crucially, an environment where solitude was not merely accepted, but structurally reinforced. His quarters are austere, a small habitation pod containing a bunk, a desk overflowing with research papers and digital tablets, and a window that frames the endless expanse of the salvage field. He has decorated this space with only one personal item: a photograph of his late wife, positioned on a shelf above his bunk, faded to the point of near abstraction by decades of light exposure. The ordinary world that Marcus inhabits is one of carefully structured routine and intellectual pursuit. Each morning, he exerts 600 hours and follows an identical sequence of actions: shower in the communal facilities, breakfast in the station's cafeteria, where he exchanges minimal pleasantries with other researchers, and then descent into his laboratory for a full shift of work. His days are consumed by the analysis of debris samples collected from the salvage field. He catalogs alien artifacts, cross-references them with existing taxonomies, and writes extensive notes for research papers that will likely never be published. That's not while he remains at the station, isolated from the peer review networks and academic conferences that determine professional advancement. His work is meticulous and thorough, but it is also fundamentally retrospective, focused on civilizations that no longer exist, technologies that have become archaeological curiosities, and worlds that are now merely fragments of rock orbiting a dead star. Commander Dr. Richard Okonkwo, the station's administrator, respects Marcus's work, but has grown concerned about his psychological trajectory. Okonkwo has noticed Marcus's increasingly infrequent participation in communal activities, his tendency to decline social invitations, his consumption of stimulants late into the station's artificial night cycle. At 58 years old, Okonkwo is a pragmatist and a career military administrator who understands the psychological challenges of deep space research stations, but lacks patience for what he perceives as Marcus's indulgent melancholy. Still, Okonkwo values Marcus's contributions to the station's scientific output and leaves him largely to his own devices, intervening only when Marcus's behavior crosses clearly defined professional boundaries. The setting itself, Station Kepler 7, and the salvage field beyond it, is harsh but familiar to Marcus, almost extension of his inner landscape. The dead star around which everything orbits is a white dwarf, a stellar remnant no larger than Earth but possessing a mass equivalent to our Sun. It is effectively cold from a radiation perspective, though its intense gravitational field creates a complex dynamics within the salvage field. The debris accumulates in orbital bands, creating a three-dimensional landscape of wreckage. Some fragments are relatively recent debris from spacecraft that crashed or collided perhaps 500 years ago. Other components are ancient, their surfaces scarred and weathered by eons of cosmic radiation and micrometeorite impacts. The salvage field is, in effect, a graveyard stretching across millions of cubic kilometers, a memorial to every civilization that reached technological sophistication sufficient for space travel, but lacked, or fortune, to survive contact with the cosmos' indifferent mechanisms. The inciting incident arrives subtly, almost unnoticed by Marcus initially, though it will later prove to be the pivotal moment around which his entire existence turns. During a routine maintenance sweep of the outer perimeter, one of the station's junior technicians, Elena Voss, a bright 28-year-old engineer fresh to the station and still possessed of youthful enthusiasm, discovers an anomaly in the sensor logs while reviewing data from the automated monitoring systems. The logs reveal irregular heat signatures emanating from a section of the salvage field that should be completely inert, a zone designated as relatively low priority for research due to the degraded and fragmented nature of the debris there. The signatures are faint and intermittent, disappearing and reappearing over a span of hours in a pattern that defies easy algorithmic explanation. The heat is inconsistent with known radiation decay patterns or chemical reactions that might occur within the salvage field. When Alina reports her findings to Commander Okonkwo, there is initial skepticism among the senior staff. The salvage field is notorious for producing false readings due to residual radiation and complex electromagnetic interference patterns generated by the interaction of stellar remnants with charged particles in the region. The senior researchers have become accustomed to anomalies that resolve into instrumental artifacts or natural phenomena of no particular significance. However, Alina's insistence and the specific pattern of the readings intrigue Marcus when he overhears a conversation about the anomaly during lunch in the station cafeteria. Something in the irregular fluctuation pattern speaks to him, a rhythm that feels almost organic, almost biological, rather than the mechanical or chemical patterns he has cataloged for decades. Marcus volunteers to investigate personally, driven by a combination of scientific curiosity and something less easily quantifiable intuition, a hunch, perhaps an unconscious recognition that something in the universe is calling to him across the void. He frames his volunteer effort in professional terms, proposing a detailed investigation protocol, promising comprehensive documentation. What remains unspoken, even to himself, is that Marcus is desperate for something to interrupt the endless routine of his exile, some stimulus that might kindle feeling in a consciousness that has been slowly calcifying into academic abstraction. The salvage field, which has been his professional domain for 8 years, suddenly feels charged with possibility. For the first time in years, Marcus experiences genuine anticipation, a quickening of his pulse that reminds him he is still, despite everything, fundamentally alive and capable of hope. Marcus suits up in one of the station's EVA suits, sophisticated piece of engineering that provides thermal regulation, radiation shielding, and oxygen recirculation for up to 12 hours of extravehicular activity. The suit's material is a pearlescent gray-white, designed to reflect radiation while maintaining flexibility for movement. As he runs through the pre-flight checklist, Marcus finds himself moving with uncharacteristic speed, eager to begin the expedition. Elena accompanies him, equipped with advanced scanning equipment and a small shuttle designated as Probe 3, one of the station's most reliable craft. As they prepare for launch, Elena shares Marcus's growing excitement, though she frames it in the context of routine scientific investigation. Still, Marcus notices the brightness in her eyes, recognizing that his own enthusiasm has proven infectious. The journey through the salvage field is disorienting and transcendable in ways that Marcus's academic descriptions can never fully capture. As they pilot the shuttle deeper into the debris zone, the wreckage of alien ships surrounds them in three-dimensional abundance. Some fragments are massive sections of hull plating the size of office buildings, twisted and shattered by whatever cataclysm destroyed the original vessels. Other debris is minute, fragments no larger than a fist, yet potentially containing layers of information about the civilizations from which they originated. The debris reflects the light of a distant white dwarf in fractured geometries, creating an otherworldly landscape that shifts and transforms as the shuttle moves through it. Marcus presses his faceplate against the shuttle's window, his breath fogging the transparent aluminum, momentarily awed by the scale and strangeness of what surrounds him. For a moment, his academic detachment fractures, and he experiences the landscape as a human being rather than a researcher, as beauty, as mystery, as something that touches the ineffable core of human consciousness, that seeks meaning and connection in a universe that seems fundamentally indifferent to such yearnings. As they approach the source of the heat signatures, the scanner reveals something unexpected. The readings are not coming from a derelict spacecraft or a natural phenomenon, but from inside what appears to be a partially buried structure, a building rather than a ship. The structure is made of a crystalline material that has resisted the degradation that typically affects metallic and polymeric substances over millennia. Its architecture is unlike anything in the human database, suggesting it was constructed by a civilization with fundamentally different aesthetic principles and engineering constraints. The structure's geometry is organic and flowing, with curved surfaces and apertures that seem designed for beings with different body plans than humanity. As they land the shuttle on a relatively stable debris field nearby and prepare to explore on foot, Marcus experiences a mounting sense of anticipation. This structure appears to be a habitation complex, a place where sentient beings once lived and worked, perhaps only centuries ago by the standards of cosmic timescales. When they enter through a breached wall, the interior is shadowed and quiet, the silence broken only by the hiss of their suit life support systems. Their helmet lights illuminate a chamber that has been sealed from the vacuum of space by some mechanism they do not immediately understand. The air inside is thin but breathable according to their instruments, suggesting that the structure's environmental systems retain some residual functionality despite centuries of abandonment. As they explore deeper into the complex, they discover evidence of habitation artifacts scattered across the floor, architectural features that suggest this was indeed a living space, possibly a school or research facility based on the figuration of the various chambers they encounter. Marcus catalogs each discovery mentally, annotating observations and hypotheses in the technical lexicon of xenanthropology. Then Marcus spots movement in the shadows, a small figure huddled in the corner, partially obscured by fallen rubble and collapsed infrastructure. At first, he assumes it is a statue or some kind of mechanical construct, but the movement is unmistakably organic, the posture expressing fear and wariness. As their suit lights adjust and focus on the figure, they realize they are looking at a child, or something resembling a child in terms of apparent maturity level. The creature is roughly 4 feet tall, with a translucent, iridescent skin that shifts through pale blues and greens as it moves, as if her dermis is sensitive to temperature or emotional states. She has 4 limbs, with delicate, elongated fingers tipped in what might be sensory organs or vestigial claws. Her head is roughly spherical, with a small mouth and what appears to be a vestigial nose, but her eyes are the most striking feature, enormous and multifaceted, like those of an insect or cephalopod, yet filled with an unmistakable intelligence and an equally unmistakable terror at the presence of these armored intruders. The initial encounter is fraught with misunderstanding, heavy with the weight of species meeting for the first time, each utterly foreign to the other. The alien child recoils from Marcus and Alina, pressing herself against the chamber wall, emitting a series of high-pitched vocalizations that their translator devices struggle to parse. The sounds are layered, with multiple frequencies overlapping, as if she is capable of producing multiple phonemes simultaneously. The translator's linguistic analysis algorithms cycle rapidly, attempting to identify patterns, grammar structures, phonetic inventories, without a baseline lexicon or previous exposure to her species' language. The effort is essentially futile. The sounds could be speech or could be distress calls, or could be some other communicative modality entirely. Elena instinctively reaches for the emergency beacon on her suit. But Marcus, sensing that sudden movements or loud noises might trigger genuine panic or defensive action from the alien child, signals her to remain still and calm. In this moment, Marcus performs an action that Elena will later describe as either the bravest or most reckless decision she has witnessed. He slowly raises one hand, making the gesture as open and unthreatening as his armored suit allows. Then, with deliberate slowness, he begins to remove his helmet, a risky move that violates basic EVA protocols and immediately triggers Elena's alarm response. She reaches for him, but Marcus holds up his other hand, indicating that she should remain at distance. The act of unsealing his helmet exposes him to the ambient atmosphere of the chamber, risking potential contamination or toxic exposure. But Marcus calculates that the risk is acceptable given the circumstances. He understands, through some intuitive process that transcends rational analysis, that revealing his face, his humanity, his vulnerability, might communicate something that technological sophistication cannot. That he poses no threat, that he is, the armor, not fundamentally unlike the terrified being pressed against the wall. The atmosphere of the chamber proves breathable, though slightly thin and carrying faint aromas that Marcus's olfactory system cannot quite process. His breath becomes visible in the cold air, creating ephemeral clouds that dissipate within seconds. The alien child's vocalizations decrease in pitch and intensity, becoming almost melodic, as if she is modulating her emotional state in response to Marcus's deliberate vulnerability. Marcus moves slowly toward her, keeping his hands visible and his movements smooth and predictable. He maintains eye contact as much as possible, though the multifaceted nature of her eyes makes this somewhat uncertain. He cannot determine precisely she is focusing her visual attention. The breakthrough comes when Marcus notices what the alien child has been eating. On the floor near her position are scattered fragments of what the salvage crew calls tech waste, degraded circuit boards, corroded metal components, fragments of what might have been organic material that has partially crystallized or undergone chemical transformation over extended periods. These are materials that humans would classify as hazardous waste, potentially containing toxic elements and compounds that would be lethal to most carbon-based life forms. Yet the child has clearly been consuming them, breaking them down into manageable pieces through some process Marcus cannot immediately determine. The magnitude of what he is observing crystallizes suddenly. This creature has survived alone in this abandoned structure, possibly for an extended period, perhaps years, perhaps decades, consuming whatever she could find in an environment that should have been utterly lifeless. The debris she has been eating is not food in any nutritional sense, but rather an adaptation to extreme scarcity, a survival mechanism that speaks to remarkable physiological plasticity and will to survive. Marcus withdraws an emergency nutrient bar from his suit's supply pocket, a dense, protein-rich substance designed for human consumption, but potentially tolerable to other organisms. He holds the child, maintaining a respectful distance. The child regards it with visible hesitation, her multifaceted eyes examining the object from multiple angles simultaneously. After what feels like an eternity but is probably only 30 seconds, she extends one of her delicate hands and accepts the bar. She examines it with her senses, smelling it, touching it, apparently testing its consistency before she begins to consume it methodically, piece by piece, while maintaining eye contact with Marcus. In this moment of profound connection across the void of evolutionary divergence, Marcus feels a transformation occur within his consciousness. This encounter is no longer an abstract scientific curiosity, an interesting phenomenon to be cataloged and published. It is a moral imperative of the most fundamental kind. He is holding what he now perceives, not as an alien specimen, but as a sentient child, an intelligent being who has been systematically starving while existing among plenty, forced to survive on detritus that no species would classify as food. The title's meaning crystallizes here with perfect clarity. What humans call trash, what they discard and ignore without thought, has been the sole lifeline for this young creature. In that moment, Marcus's entire understanding of his role on this station, his purpose in the cosmos, undergoes a seismic shift. He has spent 8 years studying the dead, cataloging extinction, documenting failure. Now, standing in the cold and dark, watching a child consume the refuse of vanished civilizations, he has encountered something that demands not understanding but action, not analysis but compassion. Marcus brings the alien child back to Station Kepler aboard Probe 3, and the decision to do so immediately generates institutional friction. Elena and Marcus transport her carefully, creating a makeshift containment area within the shuttle using the emergency supply compartment, ensuring her safety during the journey back to the station. During the flight, the child gradually becomes more comfortable with Marcus's presence, producing soft melodic sounds that the translator software continues to struggle to interpret. Marcus names her Aria during the return journey, a name that emerged from his intuition rather than any linguistic analysis. The name feels both whimsical and respectful, capturing something of the musicality of her vocalizations while honoring her personhood in a way that generic designations like Specimen A would not. When they dock at the station and Marcus begins to disembark with Aria, Commander Okonkwo immediately materializes in the docking bay, his expression a complex mixture of wonder, concern, and administrative alarm. Okonkwo is initially supportive but cautious, recognizing both the historic significance of what Marcus has accomplished and the numerous complications that accompany contact with an unknown sentient species. His first official action is to implement strict quarantine protocols. Arya is placed in an isolated laboratory chamber with environmental controls, transparent barriers providing observation capability while maintaining biological containment. Okonkwo frames the decision not as distrust but as necessary precaution until comprehensive analysis determines whether Arya poses any biological or technological threat to the station's crew. Isolation is both prudent and ethically sound. However, Marcus feels the sting of this separation, recognizing it as a necessary institutional procedure, but chafing against the formal barriers that suddenly separate him from the being he has rescued. Marcus is assigned as Arya's primary caregiver during the quarantine period, a role that provides him with regular access to her and gradually begins to establish him as the bridge between alien and human. During these interactions, Marcus begins the painstaking work of linguistic exchange. He speaks to Arya slowly and clearly, pointing to objects and speaking their human designations. Arya, demonstrating remarkable cognitive facility, begins to comprehend and eventually to approximate human phonemes. The process is neither rapid nor simple. Her vocal apparatus is fundamentally different from human anatomy, and producing human sounds requires her to engage in what must be neurologically expensive cognitive processes. Yet she persists, driven apparently by the same hunger for communication that drives Marcus. Supporting characters emerge from the station's population and begin to take on distinct roles in the unfolding drama. Dr. Sarah Pell, the station's medical officer and a compassionate 51-year-old who lost her own daughter to complications from a genetic condition, becomes an unlikely ally. She conducts comprehensive scans of Arya using the station's medical imaging equipment, discovering that the child's physiology is radically different from human biology in almost every fundamental respect. Her cells operate on a silicon-based metabolism rather than carbon-based, utilizing crystalline matrices for information storage rather than nucleotides and proteins. She can actually digest and extract nutrients from inorganic materials in ways that human biochemistry could never achieve. Her digestive enzymes function more like active catalysts, breaking down silicates and metallic compounds into metabolically useful components. This discovery is scientifically extraordinary, but Patel also discovers evidence of severe malnutrition and metabolic stress. Arya's body has been operating in survival mode for an extended period, at minimal metabolic efficiency, her growth arrested, and her development stunted by nutritional deprivation. Sarah becomes invested in Arya's recovery, collaborating with Marcus to develop a nutrition protocol that incorporates both organic and inorganic materials. Through trial and careful observation, They develop a supplemental diet consisting of precisely formulated mineral solutions combined with specialized organic compounds. Arya's response to proper nutrition is dramatic within days. Her translucent skin becomes more vibrant, her movements more fluid and energetic, her vocalizations more complex and varied. The transformation is profound, suggesting the degree to which her previous existence been constrained by the simple biology of deprivation. Elena Voss, the junior technician who first discovered the anomaly, becomes a secondary protagonist and confidant for Marcus. She helps him navigate the growing bureaucratic resistance to maintaining Arya on the station and advocates for her personhood and rights, where others might view her as merely a resource or a liability. Elena's position as a junior staff member makes her voice less authoritative, but her genuine compassion for Arya and her articulate arguments for ethical treatment gradually shift some of the more doubtful crew members toward greater sympathy. Not all crew members are sympathetic, however, and institutional resistance crystallizes around Dr. James Rutherford, the station's chief engineer and a pragmatist of the most uncompromising sort. Rutherford is 62 years old and has spent his entire career making utilitarian calculations about resource allocation and risk management. He argues vocally in station meetings that maintaining Arya on the station diverts resources, personnel, and equipment that could be dedicated to ongoing research projects. He raises legitimate concerns about biological contamination, though his tone suggests that his primary concern is efficiency rather than genuine safety. He becomes an antagonistic presence, not evil or malicious in any conventional sense, but representing the institutional logic that prioritizes efficiency, measurable outcomes, and quantifiable benefit above compassion or ethical considerations. Rutherford is the voice of pragmatism, and pragmatism is, in many ways, the true antagonist of the story. As Arya recovers physically and becomes increasingly comfortable within her containment chamber, her intellectual capabilities become undeniable. She quickly learns human language through exposure and interaction, expressing herself through an increasingly sophisticated combination of vocalizations and abstract gestures. She begins asking Marcus questions not merely about the immediate environment, but about abstract concepts about human history, about Earth, about art and philosophy and the meaning of existence. These conversations are often halting and imprecise, limited by her incomplete grasp of human linguistic structures and by the fundamental differences in how her species and humanity conceptualize reality. Yet they are genuine exchanges of thought, moments where two different forms of consciousness meet across the evolutionary chasm and recognize each other as conscious, intentional, fundamentally worthy of consideration. Marcus, in turn, finds himself opening up to Arya in ways he hasn't with other humans in years. He tells her about his wife, about the daughter he never held, about his decades of isolation, and no acceptance of solitude as his permanent condition. Arya listens, and though she cannot fully comprehend human experience, she conveys understanding through her presence and her attentive focus. A genuine friendship develops that transcends species boundaries, defying all conventional expectations about what connections are possible across evolutionary gulfs. Arya shares with Marcus visions and knowledge stored in her memory fragmentary, but evocative images of her home world. She projects these memories onto a portable display screen that Marcus sets up within her containment area, creating three-dimensional reconstructions of Thelkesh civilization, what appears to him the height of their technological and cultural achievement. Marcus witnesses vast cities of crystalline spires rising from desert landscapes, technological installations of breathtaking complexity, vast archives containing the accumulated knowledge of millennia. The Thelkesh appear to have been a spacefaring species of remarkable sophistication, their technology far advanced from human capability, their civilization spanning multiple star systems. Yet something catastrophic occurred. These visions of the present reveal only ruins, desolation, abandonment. Arya indicates through gesture and fragmented speech that her people suffered some kind of great collapse or diaspora, a retreat from their far-flung settlements that occurred roughly 300 years ago by human reckoning. The reasons for this collapse remain obscure, and Arya's understanding is fragmentary, passed down through cultural memory rather than direct experience. This rising conflict deepens significantly when Marcus discovers more details about Arya's origins through patient communication and careful questioning. Using a combination of the translator and observation of her gestural language, Marcus learns that Arya was a student. Her role in Thelkesh society was to document and study other civilizations, to serve an explorer and ethnographer, not unlike Marcus's own role. She was stationed at the structure where Marcus found her as part of her apprenticeship, gathering data on other species and civilizations in the sector. During the evacuation of the settlement, she was apparently separated from the main population. Whether she was abandoned deliberately, forgotten in the chaos of evacuation, or left behind as some kind of sacrifice to preserve dwindling resources remains unclear even to Arya, whose memory of the events is fragmentary and filtered through the consciousness of a younger being in distress. However, the rising conflict deepens when Marcus discovers evidence that his unauthorized data gathering regarding Arya's origins and Thelkesh history has attracted scrutiny. Commander Okonkwo receives a transmission from Earth Command containing a set of comprehensive directives regarding the handling of the alien contact situation. The directives make clear that Earth's political and military leadership views Arya primarily as a strategic asset, a potential source of technological intelligence and military advantage. The message explicitly instructs Okonkwo to determine Arya's strategic value, her technological knowledge, and whether she represents a potential threat to human interests. There are suggestions, carefully couched in diplomatic language, that Arya should be interrogated more aggressively, or even considered a potential espionage risk, perhaps intentionally planted by hostile alien forces. Marcus finds himself in direct opposition to these official protocols, and his response is to begin hiding research data and falsifying reports to protect Arya from intensive questioning by security personnel dispatched from Earth. This moral compromise troubled Marcus deeply. He, a man who has built his entire career on respect for empirical truth and scientific integrity, is now engaging in deliberate deception and institutional subversion. He falsifies reports indicating that Arya's technical knowledge is fragmentary and of limited practical utility, that she poses no security risk, that her continued study is primarily of historical and anthropological interest. These lies run counter to everything Marcus has believed about truth and institutional responsibility. Yet his conviction that Arya's welfare transcends protocol and authority becomes absolute. He has found something worth lying for, something compromising his principles for, and the psychological cost of this compromise is substantial but bearable in light what he has found: connection, a purpose, a reason to live beyond the abstract pursuit of understanding. Alina becomes Marcus's ally in these efforts, but she also expresses concern about the trajectory of events. She warns Marcus that his emotional investment in Arya is clouding his judgment and that he may be setting himself and the child up for eventual tragedy. Marcus acknowledges the truth of her warnings but argues that some things are worth the risk, that compassion and responsibility transcend the boundaries of protocol, that they represent the highest expression of consciousness and intention, and that they matter more than institutional loyalty or career preservation. Alina respects this position, though she continues to harbor doubts about whether romantic idealism can withstand the weight of institutional power and political pressure. The rising conflict reaches its apex in a crisis when Rutherford discovers Marcus's falsified reports through a routine audit of the laboratory's data systems. He reports the breach immediately to Commander Okonkwo, providing detailed evidence of Marcus's unauthorized data modification and his apparent protection of classified research protocols. Arya is removed from Marcus's care and placed under more stringent observation in a secured laboratory facility. Marcus is confined to his quarters pending an official inquiry into his conduct. For the first time since her rescue, Arya is isolated and frightened, stripped of the one relationship that has anchored her to this alien world. Marcus, in his solitary confinement, struggles with the weight of what he has sacrificed and the uncertainty of whether his actions have ultimately protected or endangered Arya. The rising conflict has achieved its intended function, the stakes have been raised, the tension has become nearly unbearable, and the story approaches its necessary climactic resolution. The climax begins with a sudden and catastrophic discovery that transforms the entire context of the conflict. While conducting a deep scan analysis of the structure where Arya was found, using more sophisticated sensor equipment than was available during the initial rescue mission, Dr. Patel detects a massive power signature emanating from deep within the salvage field. The signal is exponentially larger than Arya's initial heat signature and appears to be a dormant technological system, possibly centuries old, still maintaining residual charge and operational capability. As the scan intensifies and sensor arrays focus on the structure, the system responds activating and beginning to broadcast signal into deep space on multiple frequencies simultaneously. The implication is staggering and terrifying in equal measure. The Thelkesh structure was not merely an abandoned settlement, but rather some kind of beacon or archive, possibly designed to maintain automated transmission protocols across millennia of dormancy. Arya's presence there, possibly her very biology, was apparently part of a trigger mechanism, perhaps a genetic recognition system, or a proximity-activated archaeological alert. Now, after centuries of silence, the beacon has come alive, broadcasting what appears to be a distress call, a message, or a signal of reawakening to any civilization capable of receiving it. The station's sensors detect the approaching signature of a massive vessel responding to the beacon's signal. The vessel does not match any known configuration in the human database and appears to be traveling faster than currently understood physics should allow. Its approach vector suggests it will achieve orbital intercept with the station within approximately 48 hours. The vessel is approximately 3 kilometers in length, a scale that dwarfs any human construction project. As the data is analyzed and distributed, a wave of panic ripples through the station. Humanity is about to make first contact with an unknown civilization, and the circumstances are chaotic and uncontrolled. Earth Command's response, transmitted with a 15-minute signal delay that adds to the tension and confusion, is clear and unambiguous. Secure or destroy all evidence of alien contact, including Arya, until Human Command can establish protocol. The order amounts to a death sentence for Arya disguised as necessary precaution, a utilitarian calculation in which her life is deemed an acceptable loss in comparison to the potential risk posed by uncontrolled contact with an unknown civilization. Commander Okonkwo is placed in an impossible position duty to Earth Command, responsibility for his crew's safety, and a growing moral conviction that executing Arya would be a crime against consciousness itself. In this moment of institutional authority, confronting moral necessity, Marcus makes his crucial decision. He breaks from confinement with Alina's help. She has come to believe that Marcus's instincts about Arya's as essential personhood are correct, and that the official response represents a moral catastrophe disguised as rational policy. Together, they navigate the station's corridors, moving through maintenance tunnels and personnel passages that Alina knows from her engineering background. The guards stationed outside the laboratory where Arya is held are confused and uncertain in the face of conflicting orders. One is a junior officer, barely 25 years old, and when Alina speaks to him about Arya's right to exist, about the fundamental wrongness of execution, his resolve crumbles. He allows Marcus and Alina to pass, an act of moral courage that will likely cost him his career, but that he judges as necessary. Marcus and Arya reunite in the containment chamber, and the moment carries emotional weight that transcends the urgency of their circumstances. Arya, though frightened confinement and separation, expresses visible joy at Marcus's presence. She produces melodic vocalizations that the translaces interpret as questions about his absence, expressions of concern for his well-being. Marcus embraces her, a gesture that is partially awkward given their different physiology, but conveys meaning that transcends species. In this moment of connection, Arya communicates something critical through a combination of speech and gesture. She understands what is happening. Her people sent the signal intentionally, or rather, they sent it centuries ago, programming it to reactivate should certain conditions be met. Arya was left behind not as punishment, but as a test, a deliberate choice by her civilization to determine if younger members of their species could survive independently, could adapt to entirely new environments, could forge connections with other sentient beings. In essence, Arya's abandonment was a sacrifice disguised as abandonment, a wager on the possibility of mutual understanding. The approaching vessel is captained by Arya's older sibling, a Thelkesh named Keshven, who has been searching for Arya for over a century of subjective time, following the trail of the beacon and the fragmented records of the original settlement. The reunion sequence carries emotional weight, but also introduces profound moral complexity. Keshven has watched her species decline across generations, has presided over the slow contraction of Thelkesh civilization, has made the agonizing decision to conduct this final expedition in search of younger members of their species who might be adapted to survive in hostile environments. She does not view Arya's survival alone as a simple success. It is a horror story, evidence of her people's failure to protect their young, but also a glimpse of possibility, a suggestion that the Thelkesh might not be entirely doomed to extinction. The climax's central conflict emerges not as a violent battle, but as a negotiation and a test of character that unfolds across multiple fronts simultaneously. Commander Okonkwo must decide whether to engage the approaching Thelkesh vessel defensively, attempt communication, or comply with Earth Command's order to destroy all evidence of contact. Simultaneously, Marcus must convince Okonkwo that Arya's presence and her relationship with humans represents an opportunity rather than a threat, that the connection they have forged demonstrates the possibility of genuine cross-species understanding and cooperation. The story's thematic core crystallizes here with perfect clarity. Humanity's capacity for compassion and recognition of the other's intrinsic worth becomes foundation for interspecies understanding, the mechanism through which isolation and fear might be transcended. In a pivotal moment, Arya communicates with Keshven through the station's communication systems, and the two siblings conduct a conversation that Marcus can partially understand, translation protocols that have improved dramatically during his months of interaction with Arya. Arya tells Keshven that she was indeed starving, that she survived on what humans discard, that the suffering was real and formative. But she also tells her sibling something more profound, that this suffering taught her something beyond the philosophical frameworks of Thelkesh culture. She learned that intelligence and consciousness take many forms, that kindness and connection matter more than genetic heritage or cultural protocols, that her people's traditional isolationism and refusal to engage with other species has contributed directly to their decline. She argues that humanity flawed, chaotic, often cruel, but driven by both logic and genuine compassion might offer her people a path forward, a possibility for renewal that isolation can never provide. Keshven, confronted with a choice between preserving traditional Thelkesh isolation and embracing a radical new direction, makes an extraordinary decision that will echo through both species' histories. The Thelkesh vessel does not attack or attempt to forcibly retrieve Arya. Instead, Keshven requests formal diplomatic contact with humanity through Station Kepler 7. The request is simultaneously an acknowledgement of human worth and an implicit admission of Thelkesh desperation. Their civilization is dying, their population scattered across star systems they can no longer maintain contact with, their technological infrastructure deteriorating from lack of maintenance and cultural will. They need allies, need perspective, need to end their self-imposed isolation and reconnect with the broader community of sentient species that exists in the galaxy. However, the resolution of the climax is not triumphant or clean, it is appropriately complex and ambiguous. Commander Okonkwo, though visibly moved by the events unfolding and convinced by Marcus's arguments about the value of connection, must also consider Earth Command's directives and the safety of his station. He cannot unilaterally commit humanity to alliance with an unknown civilization, regardless of how sympathetic the circumstances might appear. The climax ends with tentative agreement. Arya will remain on the station as a bridge between species, and formal representatives from Earth's governmental and scientific bodies will be dispatched to engage in diplomatic talks with the Thelkesh. This represents a compromise, not a victory in opening that could lead to profound cooperation, or could ultimately fail if political forces on Earth choose isolation over connection, fear over understanding. Marcus is vindicated but not rewarded in any conventional sense. His unauthorized actions are overlooked, and effectively forgiven in the context of the broader diplomatic breakthrough. But he remains acutely aware that institutional logic has merely adapted to new circumstances. It has not been fundamentally transformed by his moral conviction. The order to destroy Arya was cancelled, but it was cancelled because circumstances changed, because it became politically inexpedient and diplomatically unwise, not because the institution acknowledged that such an order had been morally wrong. The climax thus carries moral ambiguity. The right choice was made, but through mechanisms that still operate according to institutional power and political calculation rather than principle. The story suggests that even when compassion triumphs, it often does so within existing structures of authority rather than by transcending them entirely. This realization both comforts and troubles Marcus. He has saved Arya, but he has not transformed the system that would have permitted her execution. In the weeks following the climactic encounter, Station Kepler 7 undergoes a transformation that would have been unimaginable to its staff just months earlier. The facility transitions from a remote research outpost into an unlikely hub of diplomatic and scientific exchange. The Thelkesh vessel, under Keshaven's command, establishes a stable holding orbit and sends scientific and cultural representatives to the station. A series of modular habitats are constructed to accommodate the Thelkesh delegation, structures designed according to specifications that account for their different environmental requirements and physiological needs. The initial interactions between humans and Thelkesh are awkward, fraught with misunderstanding and cultural miscalibration. Each species brings assumptions and expectations, shaped by their own evolutionary history and cultural development. The Thelkesh, accustomed to a civilization in decline, approach the humans with a mixture of hope and skepticism, uncertain whether connection will lead to renewal or merely to different forms of loss. The humans, faced with evidence of an intelligent civilization in decay, experience simultaneous fascination and discomfort. Fascination with the knowledge and technology that the Thelkesh possess, but discomfort with the obvious indicators of cultural despair and demographic crisis. However, these interactions progress gradually toward genuine exchange, particularly as Marcus finds himself serving as an informal cultural intermediary. He helps both humans and Tesh navigate the profound differences in their worldviews and operational logic. He explains to humans why the Thelkesh sometimes appear emotionally reserved or fatalistic, because their civilization is genuinely lean. Because generations have created a cultural psychology adapted to diminishment. He explains to the Thelkesh why humans sometimes appear chaotic or reckless, because their species is still in expansion, because they have not yet internalized the knowledge of irreversible loss and civilizational decline. Arya becomes a symbol of possibility, though the weight of that symbolism troubles her deeply. She is no longer merely a survivor or a research subject. She is transformed into a living testament to the potential for cross-species cooperation, a bridge between civilizations, an ambassador who never sought ambassadorial status. The media attention focusing on her, transmitted back to Earth through communication channels, makes her more famous than any of the scientists who conducted research on her. Yet she yearns for the simplicity of her early recovery, when her relationship with Marcus was purely personal rather than politically significant. She struggles with the expectation that she represent possibility and progress, that she bear the weight of her people's hope for survival and renewal. She is, at heart, still a young person who has experienced profound deprivation and loss, and the psychological burden of symbolic importance sits uneasily on her consciousness. Marcus recognizes this burden and works carefully to shield her from some of the expectations and demands placed upon her, even as he understands that she must ultimately find her own path through this new reality. He becomes a kind of mentor figure, helping her develop strategies for managing the attention and pressure, for maintaining her own sense of identity beyond the symbolic roles others attempt to assign her. In doing so, Marcus begins to heal from some of his own wounds. The relationship of care and responsibility that he extends to Arya begins to fill some of the void left by his wife's death, not replacing that loss, but by transforming it into something generative, something that allows him to extend care beyond the boundaries of his own species and evolutionary heritage. The scientific discoveries emerging from Thelkesh contact are extraordinary in scope. Their understanding of physics, particularly in the domains of materials science and energy transfer, reveals significant gaps in human knowledge that scientists across Earth are eagerly attempting to address. Research teams begin collaborative projects examining Thelkesh approaches to spacecraft design, energy generation, and environmental management. However, this technological exchange also reveals uncomfortable truths. The Thelkesh are not vastly more advanced than humanity in all domains. They are advanced in different directions. Their materials science is superior, but their biological sciences are less developed than human understanding. Their civilization's collapse was not due to external threat, but to internal stagnation, a failure to evolve, to embrace change and cross-cultural learning, to maintain intellectual and cultural innovation across generations. This realization humbles both humans and Thelkesh, suggesting that advanced technology alone cannot ensure species survival. Wisdom, adaptability, and openness to the other are equally crucial, perhaps more crucial. Dr. Patel's ongoing medical work with ARIA leads to the development of hybrid nutritional protocols that could benefit multiple species struggling with diverse environmental and metabolic challenges. The collaborative medical research becomes a model for interdisciplinary cooperation, suggesting possibilities for addressing health challenges that have plagued both species. Elena Voss transitions from junior technician to formal liaison between human and Thelkesh research teams, her early recognition of the anomaly now viewed as the catalyst for profound historical change. She moves through the station with new authority and purpose, coordinating between different research groups and facilitating the transfer of knowledge and methodology. Even Dr. Rutherford, though still skeptical of some aspects of the alliance, acknowledges that the technological and scientific opportunities presented by Thelkesh contact justify the resource investment. His pragmatism, though still sometimes in tension with the more idealistic visions of cooperation and understanding, becomes channeled toward practical problem-solving, how to maximize the efficiency of the collaborative research, how to coordinate resources between human and Thelkesh teams, how to ensure that both species derive concrete benefit from the partnership. However, the resolution also acknowledges loss and complexity with unflinching honesty. Keshven reveals that many Thelkesh settlements in other star systems were not abandoned by evacuation, but rather abandoned themselves. Entire cities gradually fell silent as their inhabitants chose isolation, cultural conservatism, and ultimately stasis over adaptation and change. Some settlements effectively went extinct not through catastrophic event but through cultural suicide, through a failure of nerve and imagination. The Thelkesh civilization is not dying in a dramatic, external sense, but in a quiet, internal one, through the accumulation of small failures and refusals to change. Some members of the Thelkesh population, even those aboard Keshven's vessel, view the alliance with humanity with suspicion or outright hostility. They see it as contamination, a betrayal of Thelkesh purity and independence. These internal fractures suggest that the path forward is neither smooth nor assured, that even with the best intentions and the most compelling evidence of mutual benefit, the weight of cultural history and conservative instinct may yet undermine the fragile alliance. Marcus experiences a profound, personal transformation. His role as a researcher has evolved into something more comprehensive. He has become a philosopher and interpreter of meaning across species boundaries. He begins writing extensively about the encounter, not merely as a scientific record, but as a meditation on consciousness, connection, and the possibility of understanding the radically other. He recognizes that his loneliness, which initially drove him to the stars, has been replaced by a sense of purpose that transcends his individual psychology. Yet this transformation also requires him to confront difficult truths about his own limitations and biases. He realizes that his initial compassion for Arya, while genuine, was also filtered through his own psychological needs, his search for meaning and connection, his desire to be needed and valued. True understanding means acknowledging this self-interest without allowing it to undermine his commitment. The resolution section also explores the immediate practical implications of the alliance. Earth Command dispatches a full diplomatic and scientific delegation to the station, transforming the research outpost into a de facto embassy. The political implications are staggering. Humanity's role in the cosmos is no longer that of isolated explorers, but of participants in a broader community of sentient species. This shift opens extraordinary possibilities, but also generates fear among certain Earth factions who view alien contact as a threat to human autonomy and primacy. The delegation's arrival initiates a new phase of negotiation and political maneuvering, as Earth's various governments and power centers attempt to determine how to approach and benefit from the alliance. By the section's conclusion, a tentative new equilibrium has been established. Arya chooses to remain on Station Kepler-7 as a permanent resident, though she maintains regular contact with Kesh Ven and her broader Thelkesh family. She begins formal studies in human culture and philosophy, reversing her earlier role as an object of study to become an active participant in cross-cultural education and diplomatic exchange. Marcus continues his research, but now with access to Thelkesh archives and perspectives, fundamentally enriching his understanding of the cosmos. The resolution demonstrates that the climactic encounter has catalyzed genuine change. Both the station, and by extension human civilization, have been transformed. However, that transformation is neither complete nor uncomplicated. The world remains in flux, with the possibilities for cooperation and understanding balanced precariously against the weight of fear, institutional inertia, and the accumulated suspicions of evolutionary history. 3 years after Arya's rescue, Marcus stands in the newly constructed Thelkesh Human Cultural Exchange Center on Station Kepler-7, watching as the first generation of truly collaborative research projects present their findings at a formal scientific symposium. The center itself is a testament to the commitment to cooperation. Its architecture represents a synthesis of human and Thelkesh aesthetic principles and engineering approaches. Vast transparent crystalline panels imported from the Thelkesh vessel create walls that are simultaneously barriers and connections, allowing visual exchange while maintaining environmental separation where necessary. A team of human and Thelkesh scientists presents breakthrough discoveries regarding the mysterious extinction events that have periodically reshaped galactic history. Their research suggests patterns and cycles that neither species had fully recognized independently, cycles of expansion and collapse, of connection and isolation, that seem to govern the rise and fall of civilizations across the known galaxy. The work is meticulous, collaborative, and represents genuine intellectual partnership between minds that evolved in different systems and carry fundamentally different cognitive architectures. Arya, now visibly older approximately 7 years, have passed in her accelerated development cycle compared to the 3 human years since has become an educator of formidable capability. She teaches young humans about Thelkesh philosophy, the spiritual and intellectual frameworks that have sustained her people across millennia of development. Simultaneously, she teaches young Thelkesh about human history and human values, about the particular forms of hope and resilience that characterize a species still in expansion and youth. She carries with her always the memory of starvation, of surviving on discarded materials, profound isolation. That memory has become central to her identity. But it is no longer purely traumatic. It has been integrated into a broader narrative of survival, resilience, and transformation. She sometimes speaks about her time alone in the salvage field not as horror, but as a crucible, a place where her fundamental nature was tested and revealed to be far more adaptable than her own people had believed possible. However, the epilogue also introduces new complications that suggest the story's echoes will continue reverberating through time and space. Transmissions have been received from other Thelkesh settlements scattered across multiple star systems, and their responses to the news of the alliance with humanity are deeply divided. Some settlements express genuine interest in contact and collaboration, seeing in the human alliance a path toward renewal and reconnection. Others view the development with what can only be described as xenophobic horror, viewing the alliance as heresy against Thelkesh cultural purity, an abandonment of principles that have sustained them since the beginning of their recorded history. Additionally, Marcus receives fragmentary data suggesting that the salvage field where Arya was found contains structures, more remnants of advanced civilizations, more potential survivors, or dormant systems awaiting reactivation. The questions that the climax seemed to resolve have merely opened onto larger mysteries. The universe, it appears, contains far more conscious beings and hidden stories than human, Thelkesh science had previously conceived. Some structures register readings, suggesting they contain consciousness in states that current science cannot adequately characterize preserved minds, artificial intelligences, or forms of existence so alien that they barely register on the instruments designed to detect them. The final image is of Marcus and Arya standing together, looking out at the salvage field through the observation windows of the exchange center. Marcus reflects on how the debris that he has spent his entire career cataloging, what humans call trash, the detritus of dead civilizations, has become the foundation for unprecedented alliance and understanding. He wonders aloud what other civilizations might be hidden within that graveyard, what other consciousnesses might be waiting, starving not for food but for recognition, for connection, for proof that they are not alone and forgotten in an indifferent cosmos. Arya responds by speaking words learned from human culture, but infused with Thelkesh meaning. She tells Marcus that her people have a concept, a word in their language that approximates the sacred waste. A philosophical belief that everything discarded contains seeds of renewal and rebirth. That waste is not true waste, but merely potential waiting for recognition and transformation. She suggests that humanity's greatest gift might not be technological achievement or political sophistication, but something more fundamental. The capacity to look at what is broken, what is abandoned, what is valueless by conventional standards, and see within it the possibility of beauty, meaning, and purpose. She gestures toward the salvage field, toward the endless debris of dead civilizations, and suggests that this graveyard is also a garden, waiting for those with eyes to see it as such. The epilogue thus returns to the story's central theme, elevated now from the immediate rescue of one child to a broader commentary on how civilizations might survive and flourish by learning to see the intrinsic value in the other, in the foreign, in what is conventionally labeled as waste. The ending is open but not unresolved, suggesting that Arya's story, Marcus's transformation, and humanity's encounter with the Thelkesh are merely the beginning of a much longer, more complex narrative one that will test both species' capacity for compassion, adaptation, and genuine understanding as they face the realities of a universe far more complex and far more populated with consciousness than they ever imagined.